Hi, this is Wesley.
And this is Kashenia.
And you're tuning into
In Between the Lines.
So today we're talking about anime for beginners.
And, because some people might have some trouble getting into it. For those of you that might not know, we started off as a podcast for the longest time, and we've been graciously given this opportunity to finally do a live broadcasting. Thanks to Austin Peay, we're finally able to do this for our as our first opportunity. But
You want to know something?
no, Wesley, what would I like to know?
Sometimes getting into anime is hard.
Well, is it really that hard? It really all depends on when you actually start out into it. So when did you get into anime?
I got into anime at like a pretty young age, but it started out more with getting into Dragon Ball Z and then slowly edging my way into Naruto and mainly just broadening from there.
So, sticking with the classics.
Trying to stick with the classics.
I would say, I guess for me, when I got into anime, I started out at a pretty young age as well. I remember when they first came on to Toonami, and I would used to watch it on Cartoon Network, and I was really amazed by this, but I thought of it as just any old regular cartoon show.
Yeah.
I stopped watching it for a while, and then in middle school, I got older, and I found newer anime to get into, and all of a sudden, I am who I am today. I am not as big of an anime nerd as you are, but I would say I'm kind of up there.
Yeah.
So, getting into anime, most people think like it's this big magical thing. Like, what is anime? What is it? It's like regular TV. You have your regular TV shows like
NCIS.
Regular genres like NCIS for mystery, crime mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
We have your comedies, your sitcoms, your romances, like, I don't know if any of you guys know this, but Days of Our Lives, Young and the Restless, those those shows.
The have and have-nots.
The haves and the have-nots. Anime is just like regular TV shows, except it's animated. Mm-hmm. So some of the big main genres that come into anime, anime can be split up into 4 different genres. So we have
shonen,
we have shoujo, kodomo, and seinen. So for kodomo is anime that's specifically made for children. So think about Backyardigans, SpongeBob, all those really young TV shows like Doc McStuffin, for example. Those are all.
Next Door is another good one.
Those are all shows that are really made for like younger audiences. There's not a big overarching story to be followed. It's just an episodic show where people do something, and the plot is really from the beginning of the show all the way to the end of that specific episode, and that's pretty much it. So in anime, there's a couple of shows like this. Some of you might be familiar with like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Beyblade. Those are some kodomo shows that are aimed specifically for children.
And then we also have shonen, which is aimed more toward males, young teen males, but that basically includes like stuff like Hunter x Hunter. Then you have like My Hero Academia, Naruto, and like the list can go on and on. And basically those are like your big hard-hitting action-packed shows.
Yeah. And then the complete opposite would be shoujo. These are shows that are made specifically for like teenage girls. They have more of a focus on character interactions, mainly between a boy and a girl. So there's a lot of romances. In these shows, you can typically get like your love interests, your love triangles. Like there's a little bit more drama with these shows, and they're mainly marketed more towards younger girls. So examples of these types of shows would be Sailor Moon, Toradora, and what's another one that you can name off?
Oh, Snow White with red hair.
Snow White with wet hair. I don't know that one specifically, but these shows, they focus more on romance, and it's more of the gushy like stuff. I'm not really much of a shoujo type person, but I kind of grew up with it. And then one of the final big categories of anime would be seinen, which is shows that are mainly aimed towards adults. So one of the stigmas with anime is isn't it for kids because it's animated? So one would think, hey, this is just for kids. And Wesley, me, you can both say that that is absolutely not the truth.
True. I mean, like if we're still sticking with seinen, that's definitely not for kids.
Yeah. These are things that are more marketed towards adults. They tackle adult themes.
More mature themes than usual.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that they show, a lot of the times is not too bad unless it's like a certain type of seinen show, but most of the time it's just really mature themes that younger teenagers or kids would just absolutely not understand. So some shows that kind of land in this category would be Tokyo Ghoul, Black Lagoon, and what's another one?
Another one would be Elfen Lied.
Oh, definitely Elfen Lied. That show, it has some gory parts, but
real gory parts. Kids should never watch that one.
I made a mistake in watching that one at first, but now that I'm an adult, I could probably handle it a little bit better than how I used to be able to handle it. And earlier we mentioned that a lot of genres land into that can be, we have an equivalence to it in American TV shows, but there's also some anime-specific genres that here in the States we really don't have much of an equivalence to it. So these shows, these genres, they go by harems, reverse harems, horror, but I'll explain that one in a little bit, and then sports anime. These ones kind of need a little bit of explaining. So harem and reverse harems, they're
questionable.
they can be very questionable at times because well, they're technically romances, but
I mean, harem is basically romance, but to the extent of you have one male protagonist who's basically getting like an onslaught of females, and whereas you have with reverse harem, you have the opposite, where you have the female who's the main character, and then you have her being basically flirting with a whole bunch of males, and yeah, it gets questioned.
There are some shows where they do it nice, where not a lot of bad things kind of happen, but there are some of those where it can get really, really questionable. But yeah, there's a lot of them where it's just like, it's really nice. So horror anime is not done in the way that you think it's done. With horror anime, I read this one article one time that the problem with horror anime is it's not all that scary. You can't really get scared by animation. It's kind of hard to do that. So the way that anime tackles it is they scare you more psychologically than with jump scares. See, with horror movies and stuff like that, the simple fact of like the eeriness, the realistic factor of it really helps bring in the horror aspects. That's the thing that actually scares you. But with anime, it's more or less certain things that happen. So characters are put into certain situations, certain things are said, or just some of the smallest things. Something that you might think is insignificant could come back at the character, and you're always sitting there being terrified and put into suspense as to what's going to happen with the character, how will things play out. And so horror anime, it eats at you more like that than it does with the regular like boo, got you type things. So sports anime, I feel like you can explain this a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, just sports anime, usually we have our version of sports, football, basketball, tennis.
The things that are usually shown on ESPN.
Yeah. And then you have the anime equivalent to that. Whereas usually with that, you get like the background information on every single player, but then you also get, it's kind of like you get superpowers on top of that.
Well, for some of them.
For some of them, not all. Like one of them in particular, you have Inazuma 11, and which that's a good soccer anime. But then you also have stuff like, you have like a boxing one, like Hajime no Ippo, and with Hajime no Ippo, it basically brings in real world aspects. So like you have the Dempsey roll, which is actually a real technique, and then you basically have incorporate all these actual boxing techniques into a fictional world.
And it's really interesting because I'm not a really big sports person, so I really don't like watching sports all that often. But with some sports anime, I can watch it basically because they focus, like you said earlier, they focus on each individual player. Well, not, sometimes you're following one main protagonist and you see how either him, if it's like an individual sport, or how he does with his team. So you really get a sense of like what their motivation is and why did they get into the sport, you know, how they're going to continue on. If they hit like a defeat, how do they handle that defeat? Because with sports the way that it's shown here, some players get their own documentaries and we get like a whole real life documentary focused on them. With these, most of the time, these anime characters, they're fictional, but it's interesting to see like their story.
Yeah, and even like if the team gets defeated, you want to figure out, oh snap, how's that team going to be able to get themselves back up, even if they have to start from ground one and work their way back up.
So I
It's
mean,
almost like Haikyuu.
so you know, these are just some of the more specific anime type genres that we have. So well, we were talking a lot about anime, but we never really answered the question, like, what is anime?
Well, that's actually a good question.
So definition term of what anime is, it's a style of Japanese film and television animation typically aimed at adults and children. That's what, kind of like Webster Dictionary, not Webster Dictionary, but
A dictionary.
if you
says.
was to type in anime definition,
That's usually the definition you'd get.
this is the definition that you usually get. So, but in my mind, anime is basically anything that's made by a Japanese studio. So some people get very confused by, they ask certain questions because anime has like this style. You can typically tell like what is an anime based off of the art style that is put within it. But there are some things that might trick you into thinking that it's actually anime. For example, a very famous cartoon that's been shown here in the West goes by the name of Avatar: The Last Airbender. A lot of people get confused because they're like, oh, that's anime.
Well, to me, I say it kind of hits the realm of being an anime, only due to the fact that it's more anime inspired. So,
Yeah, it takes a lot of inspiration from like Eastern influences. Like you look at a lot of the Asian cultures and we get a lot of influence from that, and that gets put into Avatar: The Last Airbender. But in most people's eyes, especially those that are really, really big into, they're like big into anime culture, they wouldn't consider Avatar: The Last Airbender to be an anime. Some things that you might not know, there's actually other countries that kind of do have their own anime style. They follow these certain types of like art styles themselves. And these countries, France has an anime. I think it's like called Radiant or something like that.
is it? I thought it was not Tokyo Ghoul. That was the wrong one. I was gonna say Code Lyoko, because Code Lyoko was made in France.
Code Lyoko was made in France, and then there's also like an Arabic style type anime.
China also has come out with an anime too. It's King's Avatar.
Yeah, and so these wouldn't be considered like true anime. If anything, this is more or less them taking inspiration from anime, because anime is actually just short term from animation. This is how the Japanese prefer to it. When I went to Japan and I actually talked to a few people, they asked me, it was interesting because a lot of them asked me like, oh, what are some American animes that you like? You know, like SpongeBob. And I have to laugh because I'm just kind of like, I wouldn't call that an anime, but sure, we'll call it American anime.
Isn't that because like for us, our cartoons are just cartoons to us, whereas anime for them is basically SpongeBob, like basically shows that we just like, oh, those are just cartoons.
Yeah.
It's anime to them.
Yeah.
Whereas their anime for us, we're like, yo, this is good.
This is a completely different subgenre.
Yeah.
So these are anime. This is like you know, what if you was to look up the definition of anime, this is what you would think anime is. So let's go into some questions as to what someone new might have when it comes to getting into anime. One of the questions that I hear the most of is, since it's made from Japan, do I have to know Japanese in order to watch these shows?
The answer to that is no.
Yeah, the answer to that is absolutely no. So there are two, when it comes to anime and when it comes to certain shows, it's kind of split into two as to how you would receive it. So I'll let you talk about sub and then I'll talk about dub. So
Okay.
what is there? Yeah, so there's subbed and dubbed anime. So what's sub?
Sub anime is basically like it's in Japanese, but the reason why we call it sub because you have the subtitles. And the only bad thing is that you have to figure out which subtitle you want to look at.
Because a lot of countries, they, especially if it's like a very popular anime, sometimes they'll subtitle it into different languages.
Like sometimes you'll find one, you'll be like, oh, this is an interesting one, and it turns out to be subtitled in Korean, and you're like, I don't know how to speak Korean,
And I
but I'm
can't
gonna
read it
watch it
either.
anyway.
And a lot of people, some people kind of don't like the sub scene, mainly because some people find it really hard to pay attention to the action as well as
Reading it at the same time.
yeah, reading it at the same time. It's really hard for people to kind of like do that. There are some shows that I've seen that they're strictly in sub. It'll never be in dub. And I've learned how to pick up the skill in order to read the subtitles and watch the action at the same time.
You kind of have to like not tradition yourself, but you have to train yourself in order to figure out what's the best way for you to figure out, hey, I need to look at this and read it at the same time, whether that means watching it and keep pausing it every single time the words come up, and then watching and then having to read it and be like, okay, so that's what they're saying, that's what they're saying, okay, now I can watch it, or just lean back and then have it displayed to you fully so you can try to get both of them simultaneously.
I mean, for me, I kind of learned how to like really pay attention to the subtitles or like in scenes where there's like a lot of dialogue and not much is happening in the background. I kind of just chill out and read the subtitles and kind of pay attention to what's happening. But since some people can't handle that, there's also another way you can try to enjoy anime, which is dub. So with dub, it basically means that there's a voiceover that's done in English. A lot of more popularized anime is done like this. So for instance, some of the more famous and older examples that we've mentioned earlier is Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon. Those were initially done in Japanese, and when they brought them over to the West, they wanted more people to get really into them. So a way they did this was they did it over in English. And these have some perks. You can pay attention to the action and fully enjoy what you're being shown. However, some pure anime lovers have some problems with this because when it comes to translations, you kind of lose some meaning in the show because some things get cut out, some meanings get lost, and some characters kind of get changed around. So, for example, there's a show called Dead Man Wonderland, and there's a big split as to how one should enjoy it.
Wait, there is?
Well, from some of the people that I've talked to, they have a little bit of an issue as to how they enjoy it because the dub voice of the main character.
Okay. Yeah, I can see why people would be split because you have the dude who voices for the main character, and some people are like, okay, that's good. Then you also have the sub, and people who are like, yo, I really like that voice actor. And then you have people who are just like, I don't care either way. I just like the show.
But like for that specific show, the main voice actor or the main character's voice is really annoying in English, really great in Japanese.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's really hard to find an equivalent for the English voice.
The cool thing about like being in dub is that like if you hear different voice actors, like I'm going to use the dude from Dead Man Wonderland again. Like if you hear the dude who voices him in English, it's easy for you to pick him out when he voices other characters in other works because you're like, hold up, that's the same dude who voiced in Dead Man Wonderland.
It's kind of funny. It's like a little bit of a Easter egg hunt, sort of.
Yeah, it's almost like Where's Waldo?
So Another thing that some people have questions about when it comes to getting into anime is, well, in order to be considered a true anime fan, would I have to watch some of the classics, sort of like Full Metal Alchemist, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto? What is your opinion on this?
I mean, you don't have to, but I mean, it's always good to like go back and just take a look at it. Because if you do, then you're just like, oh, okay, now I see what people were talking about. Because like my brother, he was like, hey, I want to watch Naruto. Are you sure you want to do that? And he's like, yeah, but I want to watch it from when he was a kid. So he took himself through when he was a kid all the way up to the war arc, and then he's like, now I see what all the hype was about. And I mean, you can do that, but then there's stuff like Cowboy Bebop, and a lot of people don't know about it, and they're just like, I ain't gonna look at it, that's too old for me. And I'm just like, dude, it doesn't matter if you're too old, if you're too young, you can just watch it if you want.
Yeah, I would have to say no, only because I haven't watched a lot of the classics myself. Like I said, I got into the scene at a very young age, but I didn't watch a lot of Dragon Ball Z. You have seen so much of it. You basically can tell me every plot line that has happened within that show.
I'll tell you almost any scene, fight for fight.
And when it came to Naruto, I stopped halfway through the first arc, and so I'm not really big into the big classics because they were like long running. I'm more into the current scene where there's seasonal anime where it's much more manageable for me. Each season it's about 12 to 24 episodes. It's so much better for my schedule, in all honesty.
But then there's so much to look at for this season, though.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of variety. You're at least given a lot of variety with each coming season.
You just gotta pick out the ones you want to look at.
So for this question, like I said, I would have to say no. It really depends. If you get into anime now and you like some of the newer stuff and you're curious about some of the younger stuff, I would say do your research, because that's what I basically did. I got into it when I was younger, kind of quit for a little bit, got back into it about a few years ago. And after doing a little bit of research, I started to look at some of the plots for some of the older anime, and even some anime that I've never even heard of. So after doing that research, I started making myself a gigantic list of anime I eventually want to get to when I have the time.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you're an encyclopedia. You basically know everything about anime.
And that encyclopedia just keeps on growing.
It keeps growing and growing. So I guess some things that we can kind of get into, some things that aren't really like categorized, otaku culture. What is it? What is otaku culture?
Now, that's still an interesting question, because you have some people who are like, oh, those are just quote unquote those people. But then I'm like, what contributes you to be a certain person? I mean, just because somebody likes anime doesn't mean they like anime and then everything that goes along with it. But then there are also people who like it just for the Asian culture.
Yeah.
And then there are some people who dive really deep into it and try to find every single like deep hidden meaning behind it. I think I'm one of those people.
You are.
But you know, if you kind of get what I'm saying.
So yeah, with otaku culture, it's basically just it's a group of people that are, otaku basically is like a lot of Japanese type culture. So we're more into that scene, and we want to learn more about Japanese society, but the one way we kind of really got into it was through anime and video games. So otaku culture is those people an otaku is someone that's really into anime, Japanese video games, anything based off of that. They collect, some of us, I would have to say, me, who doesn't have a lot of money, collects a little bit of figurines, has some merchandise, but I don't have like a lot.
See, whereas you collect a bunch of figurines, I collect a bunch of manga. So
Yeah.
we are kind of like opposites of one another.
And there are those that take it to the extreme. This is whenever we say otaku and we kind of explain it, that's why some people say it's those people when you mention an otaku, because there are those that go really, really deep into the extreme. They have almost every figurine known to mankind. They spend more money on anime merchandise than they do on living.
Yeah.
And
I know a couple people who are like that.
And I don't have the money to do that, but I also don't want to kind of go like that. So
I mean, your boy has to eat.
I like food. But yeah, that's basically what otaku culture is. So I guess one of the lasting questions that I kind of have for this particular episode is, what got you into this culture? Like, what made you want to become part of the otaku culture?
I guess like at first, remember how I was saying that like I started off with Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. I guess the reason how I turned into like what I am now is because of me going into like something like Assassination Classroom, where yeah, it's a shonen, but it also teaches you something. And then me learning from that, and then me like, okay, I learned the lessons from this. What other lessons can I learn from other anime? In which dives me even deeper and deeper into figuring out, oh snap, you can actually learn something from a lot of different anime that you keep in your head, and you're just like, okay.
Which is surprising to a few people, because people assume like since it's a cartoon, you can't really learn much from it.
Yeah.
But I guess from a writer's point of view, which is, since you're a writer, you find a lot of interest into the stories. Well, for me, I'd have to say one of the reasons why I'm really in deep, well, not as deep as you, but deep into this culture is because me personally, I'm an animator, so I'm studying to become an animator, and some of the styles that I've seen in this show are really, really interesting. Like the art styles, some of them can be very beautiful, some of the animation can be super smooth, and I really like that part about it. But also, I like some of the stories that we can get from it. There are some things that are done in animation that you just can't really get from a live action TV show.
Kind of like fusing 3D animation with 2D animation.
So I guess some of the lasting things is, what are, to get someone started into the animation scene, what are some animes that you would recommend to a newcomer?
First, My Hero Academia. Second, probably Naruto. Start them off easy.
Yeah, no.
Well, I mean, if you start off slow, then you can easily get into it. But what about for you?
For me, I don't know. I really liked My Hero Academia, and I don't know. I guess My Hero Academia would be like a really good one, since superheroes seem to be really big into the scene right now. But I would have to say this was a really interesting episode. It was the first time on video, and we're hoping to do this some more next time. But I thank you. I thank again Austin Peay for allowing us to have this opportunity. And we're hoping to.
We should also give one more shout out to Youngstro Beats, who also provides all the music for all of our episodes.
So he usually provides music for our podcast, and hopefully he'll be providing the music for this one. So we'd like to thank you again for tuning in.
And thank you, Austin Peay, for helping us out.
And you've been watching In Between the Lines.